Go. Brethren, a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you again for joining us today. As usual, I'm going to start with the boring housekeeping. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted onto our YouTube page. Therefore, those of you who do not wish to be seen, please feel free to turn off your videos now. To avoid any disruptions during the talk, if you could also please ensure that your microphones are kept on mute throughout, that'd be fantastic. We do try our best to keep everybody on mute, but on occasions, the odd one does slip through. So if you could just self-manage, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. There will be a Q&A session after the talk as always. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the hand up icon, which can be found in the participants section or participants tab on Zoom, or by hovering your mouse over your image and clicking the three dots on in the corner. Once you've raised your hand and your name is called out, if you could then please unmute yourself, ask your question, but then please don't forget to put yourself on mute again afterwards. Thank you. We are once again giving away 2 of our bespoke Freemasons Without Borders mugs. For a chance to win, it's a very, very easy question. And Scott Cargill, if you're on, you're not allowed to answer this. In the Allied Masonic degrees, how many degrees are there? Please type your answers in the chat section, and as always, the first 2 correct answers will win. Brethren, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, Most Worshipful Brother Paul Mycock, first Grand Master of the Worshipful Society of Freemasons, known to many as the Operatives. Paul began his Masonic journey by becoming a member of Lodge of Perseverance, number 4622 in Warwickshire, and is a past master of Lodge of Glittering Star, number 322, which is a military lodge in the Irish Constitution that holds a travelling warrant, and a lodge which is responsible for sponsoring the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts way back in 1752. Paul, as you can imagine, is a senior member and holds grand rank within all the orders he's part of, which I'm led to understand is absolutely anything and everything to do with Masonry. Paul is also a member of the Craft and Holy Royal Arts chapter in the English, Irish and Scottish constitutions. He is a very well-respected Freemason and has travelled to many countries around the world, sharing his passion for Masonry. So without further ado, brethren, first Grand Master Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Right, well, first of all, I think I do also need to say that we normally work in a triad, so I'm pleased that the second and third Grand Master Masons are also on the call, although they will be quiet. And I also know that Nigel, who is in Perda, previous first Grand Master Mason, on the call, and so he's got to be quiet, but we may call on you later, Nigel. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to try and put up share a screen to put a PowerPoint up, and perhaps people can let me know if it actually works. Does that show a PowerPoint? Can someone tell me how?
Perfect, Paul.
Okay, that's great. So, in terms of this talk, I intend to take, as instructed, around about 30 minutes to introduce you to the operatives, and then we'll take questions. And as I say, there are other learned members of the society present, so if I don't know the answers, they probably will. Now, I've actually started this off with our logo, our coat of arms. Now, whilst it is not registered with the as a coat of arms, what it is actually heraldically correct. A lot of work was done on this by Bob Morrow and also Trevor Dutt, who is actually on the call, to ensure that we don't get colours in the wrong order and clashes and things like that. The reason that it does have strange colours on there is because each of the segments within the coat of arms represents one of the worshipful companies that make up our title. So you can see the 4 dominoes, for want of a better description, that's the paviors, and so it goes on. Now, in order to not infringe copyright, whilst using the symbols that they have on their arms, we've actually changed the colours. And I've been informed by Bob Morrow that that keeps us out of court. So that's the reason that it looks a little bit like that. Now, in terms of the history of the society, we actually go back to 1913, which was the time when Channel Row was actually founded. Prior to that, the Guild Masons, which go back way into the sort of 12th, 13th century, had a lot of procedures and rituals which Clement Edward Stretton studied and was involved in. Now, I don't intend to spend a great deal of time on the history because, as you can see, we do have a website, www.operatives.org, and our history, as researched by David Kibble-Rees, who sadly has died very recently, only a month ago, is actually very complete. And I think that if you go to that site, you'll find it far more interesting than listening to me talking about just the basic history of the order. However, there are some important names in here. Stretton, as I say, without him, the Operatives would not be about. And secondly, Dr. Thomas Carr, who really is responsible for the society being born when he actually held a 7th degree lodge in London on the 21st of May. The structure of the society. Grand Assemblage is sort of our equivalent of Grand Lodge, and that is ruled by the 1st, 2nd and 3rd Grand Master Masons. There are only 3 Grand Master Masons in the whole of Israel, according to our ritual. So to confuse everybody, we can also have a 4th one, which is the Pro-2nd Grand Master. He is actually comes into being on occasions when the 2nd Grand Master Mason is not resident in the United Kingdom. Under those circumstances, we have a Pro-2nd Grand Master in the United Kingdom, because that is typically where we do the majority of our work with the 3 Grand Master Masons, down to the number of assemblages that we have in the UK. And John Wicks was the previous Pro-2nd Grand Master Mason at the time that Frank Jeffries was our 2nd, and he was resident in Sydney, Australia. So as you can imagine, that was a bit of a jaunt if he needed to come over for a 7th degree. John, of course, now has moved on to be our 2nd Grand Master Mason. Our equivalent of provinces are regions, and they are ruled by a Deputy Grand Master and Senior Past Master. That's one person, by the way, for those of you who are not in the Operatives. He's a Deputy Grand Master Mason in the sense that he is the Grand Master Mason Superintendent of Work for that particular region, but he is also the Senior Past Master within that region. I'll speak a little bit more about past masters in a while. Now, as you will have seen, we actually meet at the bottom level in assemblages, and those are assemblages of degrees from the 4th to the 1st degree. Again, I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment or two. But above that, to make it simple in terms of craftish, we have 2 lodges that are above that, which are our 5th degree lodge and our 6th degree lodge. The 6th degree lodge is the Lodge of Haradim. That is run by the Senior Past Master, or in some regions, a Deputy Master Mason 6th degree. And the 5th degree lodge is a Lodge of Menachkin, which is ruled by the Deputy Master Mason 5th degree. Now, a popular misconception is that the Deputy Master Mason 5th degree is a deputy to the Senior Past Master. He is not. He is merely the head of the 5th degree lodge, where the 5th degree ceremonies are worked and those degrees are conferred. At one time, it is believed that there were a full set of officers for all lodges. So in other words, there was a master and wardens for a 1st degree lodge, then another for a 2nd degree lodge, and so on. It pleased the Grand Master Masons to say that the lodges, the 1st to the 4th degree, could actually have the same officers throughout, and that's why they are called an assemblage of lodges. Now, in effect, the 1st degree lodge is where a brother enters the order, is an indentured apprentice. That is, you could think of as being in the quarries. So the 1st degree lodge is indentured to a master. He works in the quarries for 7 years. In reality, it's 1 meeting, because he is allowed to move on to a 2nd degree in the next meeting of the assemblage, if that's convenient. But symbolically, he spends 7 years in the quarry. At the end of that period, if his work is satisfactory, he goes into a 2nd degree lodge and becomes a fellow of the craft. And he then has his bond cancelled, so he is no longer indentured to that particular master. Now, the importance of being indentured to a specific master is that you must do your 2nd degree in the same assemblage as you were indentured into. Other degrees you can do in other assemblages, but the 1st and 2nd must be done in your mother assemblage. The only time that that may differ is in circumstances that we have had where someone has actually left the order as a 1st degree and then returned and living in a completely different country. In this particular case, it was a person in England who moved to South Africa, and therefore it was necessary for us to waiver that rule to allow him to actually take his second degree. It was a bit far for him to travel. Let me just move on to talk about the regions that we have. At the present time, these figures are correct as of today. We've got 3,195 subscriptions in the order, and that is consisted of 2,736 members. So as you can see, that we have quite a few people with multiple memberships. As I said earlier, the majority of our assemblages are in England. There are 65 of them in 16 regions. But as you can see from this particular slide, we actually go around the world. And towards the bottom, you can see that we talk about 10 dark assemblages. Now, what that is where effectively an assemblage has stopped working. We don't have a patent or a diploma for a particular assemblage. The patent is actually provided to the master, and each time you have a new deputy master mason, he gets a new patent. So effectively, if the labour ceases in a particular assemblage, it simply goes dark, and it can be reponed at a later date. And that has actually happened in India, where we actually, no, sorry, in Brazil, not in India, in Brazil, where we reponed a assemblage that had gone dark, moved it, and then brought it back to life with a new set of members. So those dark assemblages are included in our totals of 128. We also have got 4 assemblages in India which did not have sufficient materials to complete when we did a constitution there. Now, the materials are people. We are living stones in the operatives. And to save having to travel back and forth to India very quickly, when we were last there, we constituted, consecrated in craft terms, created a number of assemblages. The senior past master made it known that he would require, I think, around about 4 or 5 more. So what we did is that we did a partial constitution of those assemblages, and at a relevant point within the ceremony, the senior past master pointed out that he had run out of materials. So therefore, the constitution ceremony was halted, and he was informed that once he had sufficient materials, we would send a commission for him to complete the constitution of those assemblages. So they're kind of in a limbo state, waiting to become live. Also, we've got another 4 assemblages at least pending, where petitions have gone in for the assemblages to be created in the United States of America. But sadly, because of the COVID situation, we've not been able to go to the USA to actually start that work. So that is work that will take place, hopefully, in 2021. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the degrees, a person comes in as an indentured apprentice. And in order to qualify, you need to be a member of the Craft, the Mark, and the Holy Royal Arch. And you need to be a subscribing member at the point that you are indentured. You then move on to become a fellow of the Craft. After that, a fitter and marker. Now, let me explain some of these terms. As I said, the first degree takes place in the quarry, that you're there for 7 years. And you then come to the stone yard, which you can think of as a long yard with gates on it or doors on it. And in the second degree stone yard, the gates above it are closed. So people in the second degree stone yard, if there are degrees being worked, the doors from the second to the third and so on upwards are closed. So therefore they can only see the work that is taking place in the stone yard where they are working. And in the case of the fellow of the craft, it is doing what we know in the craft, which is that they are smoothing and preparing the stones for the hands of the more expert workmen. When we come, however, to the third degree, when one becomes a fitter and marker, this now is a situation whereby you will recall that King Solomon stated that no tool of iron or metal could be used on the temple site. So therefore, the way that the temple had to be constructed is that there had to be a stone yard at some part where there is a template that the stones can be put together and, if you will, fitted to each other layer by layer. Once a complete layer has been produced, the stones are then marked so that it can be shown how they will be reconstructed when they're taken to the temple site. So all of this sort of fitting and chiseling and hammering with metal tools takes place in the 3rd degree stone yard. The 4th degree actually takes place at the temple site, where the materials have been moved and they are marked and they are now setted and erected into position, and the temple is built. So it's a little bit like where you've seen buildings, ancient buildings being moved brick by brick, where the bricks have been marked and the building has been reconstructed in another location. Well, that's what's happening in the 4th degree. In the 5th degree, that is actually 3 degrees in total. It's the degree of intendant, overseer, and superintendent and warden. So within that degree, we actually now start to work with our brains rather than with our hands. And one has to be a 5th degree to take the office of warden or superintendent of work. Superintendent of work is kind of a director of ceremonies in craft terms. Now, to move on to the next degree, to the 6th degree, which is that of a past master, and that's not a spelling mistake, it's past as in he has passed the test, not past as in that he is a has-been. It is necessary to be a past master in both the craft and the mark degree to attain the 6th degree. And it is a fairly lengthy ceremony where it becomes clear to the candidate that he is not just a living stone, but he himself is a microcosm of the complete temple. It's a very, very moving degree, and it's got a superb lecture that sits alongside it. The 7th degree, that of a Grand Master, only the 3 Grand Masters, or 4 if there is a pro, hold the 7th degree, and therefore hold the title Most Worshipful. It is possible to have honorary 7th degrees, honora causa, for people who have worked well within the society or are former Grand Master Masons, if you will. They are an honorary 7th degree and actually are still past masters of the 6th degree. Now, when Nigel moved on a few weeks ago, after I was installed as the most worshipful first Grand Master Mason, Nigel went back to being a right worshipful brother with an honorary 7th degree, and he returned to the stone yard for future employment. We do not have past ranks in the operatives. You have the rank, and then you move on to be deployed again later when your talents are required. There is one exception to that, which is the 3rd Grand Master Mason, and I'll explain why he's different in a moment or two. Now, in terms of the 7th degree, in our constitutions, only 7% of our membership can hold that degree. So it is quite rare. And the only exception to that is when people reach the age of 90, they can be considered for the 7th degree, and that doesn't come off that total, if you will. So there is a gift there for getting to 90. Time served in the degrees, as I said earlier, the 1st degree, you need to be in it for 7 years, but it's actually the following meeting. All of the other degrees up until the 7th degree is considered to be symbolically 1 year, and it's at least 1 intervening meetings, 2 meetings, and 3 meetings. When one is moving from the 5th to the 6th, it's a year, and as I say, 6th to the 7th, don't ask. Now, we do have a number of other honours within the order. I'll go from back to front, actually. Certificate of Merit, that is for people who have done exemplary service, but for whatever reason are unable to attain the 6th degree. Maybe they haven't become a past master in the craft or whatever, and therefore, you know, we can give them an honour as a certificate of merit. Distinguished Service Award, well, that really says what it is. The Grand Master's Award is much more coveted. There's only 4 people with that, but the main one in the order is the Order of Service to Operative Masonry. Now, I've got here the yearbook, and if I just move down to the particular page, you'll see here that the Order of Service to Operative Masonry has only been actually issued 6 times, and 3 of them sadly have passed on. Frank Jeffries, for the work that he has done for the order, he was the latest person to be awarded the Order of Service to Masonry. You'll notice there's some names missing off there. So Paul Davis and Peter Fotheringham are the only other 2 people with that particular award. Now, freemen of the society. that's the people down the bottom here. And you'll see there's some rather Scottish looking names down there. And the reason for that is that we do have a concordat with the Grand Sanhedrin, or the Guild in Scotland, which is an equivalent society with one or two small differences. One of those differences is that the Guild does actually have past ranks. And when we signed the concordat, they very kindly conferred a past rank on our 3 Grand Master Masons. And so consequently, we kind of needed something to reply with. And after a lot of work with David Kibble-Rees, we came up with the idea of a Freeman of the Society, which is an award that we could give for people who are not necessarily members of our society, but members of a sister society, to recognize the work that they've done. But also it can be given to members of our society who've done exemplary conduct. And it makes them effectively an honorary member of the society as a whole, and not just an honorary member of an assemblage. That has actually only been done 3 times. David Kibble-Rees was made a Freeman. Also, Jim Field was made a Freeman, who has done a lot of work within the society. And finally, Jeff Round, who was the Footing Cornerstone representative and superintendent for the entire society for a number of years. And he continued to do that after he'd had a disc slip in his back, which had actually paralyzed him from the waist down. He continued to do that job for about another 6 or 7 years. And it was felt that he had done more than sufficient to become a Freeman. So moving back to my presentation, as we say, we do have former Grand Master Masons. We don't have a past rank. And the 3rd Grand Master Mason, as you'll see in a moment, is a very special case for that. We do have a couple of them on the call tonight as well. So the jewels of the society. Well, the first jewel, I think that you may be able to see this in the small thing in the corner. It's just a blue cord, which is popped around your neck. It's probably the most expensive piece of string in Freemasonry. And then as you move through the degrees, on that are hung a square, and you can see them on the screen here, a square. There's the oblong square, a footing cornerstone, there's an elbow square, which is the 5th degree, and then a 3, 4, 5 with the 5 missing square, well, triangle, which forms a square for the 5th and the 6th and 7th degree. In the 6th degree, that will be silver, and in the 7th degree, it is gilt, or it sort of looks a bit like gold. There's a bit of ritual in the society. I just thought I'd just put my books out and let you see the number of them that there are. So for those of you who like rich ritual, there is a lot. In terms of the 3 Grand Master Masons, I thought I'd put that up to scare the horses, really. But what I really want to draw your attention to here is the rods. And each Grand Master Mason has a rod. The 1st Grand Master Masons is the blue one, which is the longest. Then the red is for the 2nd, and the black for the 3rd. And they are actually in the proportions of 3, 4, 5. And so that means you can put them together to form a right-angled triangle. Now, let's just talk quickly about the degrees and the ceremonies. There obviously are the degree ceremonies that I've made some reference to as we've gone through this talk. So I'll say little more about that than to say that you would recognize chunks of them from the craft and the mark, but they're done in a very operative perspective rather than speculative. In terms of the constitution ceremony, that's how we form a new assemblage. That is quite unique. Well, it's unique, it can't be quite unique. It is unique. And it is actually a very long ceremony. It takes around about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. It starts off by having a flat ground, which is a threshing floor in Aruna, where we're going to actually build the temple. The first thing that is done is that the room is plunged into darkness, and we sight the pole star. And we do that with 2 plumb lines so that we can actually produce a north-south line. Then the Grand Master Masons will use their rods to form a right-angled triangle, 3, 4, 5, to allow them to then get the east-west line. And then by making use of certain properties of that triangle, they're able to set the diagonals so that the correct proportions for King Solomon's temple can be produced. It is a very complex piece of geometry, and there is actually a lecture that goes alongside it called the geodetic lecture that explains it. And let's just say that it takes a bit of reading. Now, you can see after Constitution, I've put rededication. And the reason for that is that we've now most unlikely to do very many more Constitution ceremonies in the United Kingdom. We're pretty well serviced with assemblages around the country. However, we've got assemblages which are coming up to their 25th anniversary and indeed 50th anniversaries. And so what we've decided to do, and our chairman of publications who is on this call knows that he has got a bit of a job to do, is that we're going to make a version of the Constitution ceremony that can be done to, if you will, go with that event, to allow us to demonstrate how a constitution works while celebrating the fact that this is a special birthday for that assemblage. And we also will do that in such a way that there are no secrets of the operatives involved, which will allow that assemblage to invite members of the craft, the Mark and the Royal Arch to come along and view that ceremony. So that should act as quite an interesting advertisement. Now, let me speak about the drama. The drama is our equivalent of the third degree in the craft. It is where our third Grand Master Mason goes out of office. The way he goes out of office is that we kill him. There are 3 ruffians and they try to get the secrets from him of the 7th degree. He won't give them the secrets and therefore he gets killed with a heavy maul. I'm sure that is familiar to you. The secrets that they are talking about are the lengths of the rods, and actually he breaks his rod up and they can't work out the length of it. Now, this year, we couldn't work this in front of a full grand assemblage. It would have been impossible with COVID. It's got 30 people in the cast to actually do the job. So we employed a professional media company to film this. They came in with 3 cameras, sound crew, and Mark Mason's Hall were wonderful. They allowed us to use the whole of the ground floor. So we were able to make use of different rooms for different scenes, and the entire drama was recorded, along with the installation of the third Grand Master Mason. We did an installation of the second Grand Master Mason for completeness, and the installation of myself as the first Grand Master Mason. We've not yet seen it. We're expecting to have the director's cut in November. Because in the past, we actually have demonstrated the ancient drama at Great Queen Street as part of our centenary celebration, we're going to make this, this video available to members of the craft, the Mark, Royal Arch, and indeed, potentially members of the public, because members of the public saw it the time we did it at Freemason's Hall. But more significantly, and I think more importantly, this drama is only ever worked here once a year, and therefore there are a lot of our members who have never seen the ancient drama. We will be producing DVDs in formats relevant to their geographies to send this around the world so that people can actually witness this unique ceremony. Now, be with the difference, a couple of other things about the operatives that often cause confusion. We have the lodge room the other way around. The master doesn't sit in the east, he sits in the west. And you know, the north and the south are also interchanged. And one of the reasons we do that is that when one is talking about the pillars when they were named, depending upon which version of the Bible you read, it talks about he set up a pillar in the south and called it Jarkin, or he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple and set up that on the right pillar and called that the name of Jarkin. So therefore, King Solomon needed to have the south on the right, so he must have been in the west facing east. So therefore, as far as we're concerned, that is where the master sits, and he's sitting there so he can observe the rising sun, and similarly that he can that the wardens can observe the sun at its meridian, etc. J and B are 2 officers, or Jarkin and Boaz are 2 officers within the operatives. They represent a doctor and a priest, i.e. the chaplain and the charity steward. I'll say a few words about charity in a moment. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Right. In terms of jewels and in terms of charity, There are two items in the society: the Footing Cornerstone Fund, which has been around for a number of years, where we have collected over a period of time significant funds for us to have our own headquarters. And we've had that headquarters now in Eton Soakham, near to Cambridge, for some time. And the fund still contains quite a lot of money, and people still continue to give to it. This year, we're setting up a grand charity for the operatives, whereby brethren can make a choice if they want to contribute to the Footing Cornerstone Fund for the upkeep of the headquarters, or if they want to actually provide money for charity. Now, the charities that we will support are very specific. They are craft and mark festivals, because we see that as part of the job of building the operatives. We recruit from those areas, and so therefore we feel we need to give something back to them. This year we have made a contribution to East Lancashire of £4,000 from our grand charity. The charity itself will be officially produced over the course of the next few months. We've sent paperwork in for the Charity Commission via Justin Parker, our Grand Registrar, and hopefully we will get that set up so that people can take advantage of gift aid and society can get the tax back also. And you can see the jewel there is the 7th degree jewel, and the markings on there show that I've given money to the charity right up to the Footing Cornerstone, where there is a Footing Cornerstone with my mark on it. Now, I'm going to just say that symbol. When people see that, they kind of flinch for a second. Let me remind you, the society was founded in 1913, and this symbol was around a long time before that. The actual symbol itself comes from, if you see the little squares over here on the right-hand side, you can take 4 footing cornerstones and place them together. And as you can then see, the squares would fit on the joints of those stones with a central point. Now, one of the things that happens when we constitute an assemblage is the first Grand Master Mason marks the centre, and he says, there is a centre, work ye to it. Now, if you consider the pole star, that is the one point in the heavens that doesn't move. And there is the Big Dipper that rotates around it. So again, this is a symbol of where the centre is, and that's the point upon which the volume of the sacred law is placed. It also is the light. It represents the sun. There's an awful lot of work being done on this particular symbol, and it is placed on a particular jewel, as you can see on the left-hand side, which is the jewel that is worn by a former 3rd Grand Master Mason after he has been killed. And it is to show that he actually lost his life whilst preserving the secrets of the order. And so he is the one person who gets a special jewel to wear when he moves out of office. Brethren, I've gone through that at what feels like the speed of light. There's a tremendous amount more that I could say to you about the operatives, but I did promise that I would leave some time for questions. So I'm going to close down this particular stop sharing, and I guess I hand back to your good self, Ameet.
Oh, thank you so much. Amazing, amazing talk. I think it's taken everybody by looking at everybody there. It's kept their interest, which is good. We've kept them all on. We'll move straight to the questions and answers, or questions. Could we have Brother Derek come first, please? Hi, Derek.
Thank you very much. I didn't realise I was going to be first, but can I say thank you to Paul for a splendid talk. And I'm picking up on 2 points. When a new assemblage is constituted, when I was Grand Bursar, I used to prepare either a charter or a warrant. I don't know if you can explain a bit more about that. It named the people who were going to be the first officers. And the second point, you mentioned about the rededication, which is new to me. And Purbeck Quarries, the one in Dorset, has already had its 50th anniversary. And I wondered if there was anything we could do when we eventually meet again with the ceremony of rededication.
Answer to both questions. Yes, Derek, indeed, we still do produce a patent, which is on a much larger piece of paper, but it is still a patent for the first DMM, even though it has the names of the people on it. It's not a warrant for the assemblage as such. It's a larger version of a DMM's patent, and certainly that's what it has become over the last few years. In terms of rededication, absolutely. Any assemblage that has passed the milestone, we would be delighted to come along and do a rededication there to allow you to celebrate that, albeit that we're doing it retrospectively.
Right, we look forward to trying to arrange that. Thanks, Paul.
There's a new Grand Clerk, get in touch with him.
Thanks, Derek. Next, could we go to Brother Dudley? Hi, Dudley, how are you?
Hi, mate. Still above ground, thank you. Thank you for that excellent talk. The perennial controversy about the position of the pillars, this has been going on a long time, as you're aware. Is the left and right viewed from inside the temple or from outside the temple? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, obviously, the pillars were reversed after the exposures of Freemasonry. And in France, for example, the original jacking comes first, bars come second, because they kept the original left and right. I just wondered on your views of this controversy.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, the two quotes that I gave were not ritual; they're actually biblical. They were from Kings and Chronicles, and in Kings it talks about them being on north and south, and in Chronicles it talks about them being left and right. And our view is that is viewed from inside the temple, looking out. So that then places them left and right, looking from effectively the west. Now, in terms of them being turned around for ritual purposes, yeah, of course. I think that was done because of exposés, wasn't it? Where people knew the passwords, so they just switched them around. But they're only switched around in the context of whether they're first degree or second degree. They haven't switched them from left to right or right to left, as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dudley. Next, if we could go to Bharat Bhai from India, please. Welcome, Bharat.
Thank you, Ameet. Paul, thank you for that wonderful lecture.
Yeah.
And it's good to see you, Paul. And we missed you in that lecture in India. That day you fell sick. So it's nice to see you back up and about. Congratulations on becoming the first Grand Master Mason. And look forward to working under you in a different capacity. I have one point for your consideration. Since you were talking about dedication ceremonies for those assemblages which have reached milestones, like the 50th milestone or whatever, would you consider having similar ceremonies for individual living stones who have contributed, say, 50 years to the society or something like that?
That's an interesting point. I think perhaps something we could take offline, Bharat. I certainly wouldn't be against the idea. My reasoning for the situation that I described in terms of rededication was more that there are so many people who have not seen a constitution, and overseas we're still doing plenty of constitutions that they're happening. Our membership is growing overseas. In the UK, we are not likely to have many new assemblages, so therefore there's an awful lot of people in the UK who will not get to see a ceremony that I think is really not just a beautiful ceremony, but it gives people so much information and education in terms of Masonic tradition. There's so much in there that makes a lot of sense to people when they see it, when they've come from the craft and the mark. So it was a way really of being able to do a demonstration of that, and also to be able to involve, if you will, senior members of the craft and the mark in that ceremony so that they can witness it. Now, that's actually an idea I got from Gordon Setterfield, who wanted to do that a few years ago. So Gordon, well done. We did pick up on it eventually.
Great. Yeah. Just something food for your consideration in the year ahead.
Yeah, we'll take a chat offline on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat Bhai. Paul, I've got a question that's come in. If, for instance, a brother wanted to join the operatives abroad, but at present there was no facility to do that, how would they go about joining the operatives?
Well, it depends where they are, I suppose. You know, I mean, we do have people who travel quite long distances to be a member of the Operatives. As you saw from the screen I put up, you know, we've got assemblages in a lot of countries. The alternative, of course, would be to come to England and join here. And, you know, we could certainly do that. Alternatively, get lots of friends, and then we might see whether or not we might go and constitute an assemblage, because they have to start from somewhere. One thing I would say on that, though, you did see that wide range of ritual books that were sitting on my table. The Operatives is complex in the sense that the constitutional way that you work the degrees with certain timescales between them, and the degrees themselves are not simple. There's a lot of work in them. Sometimes it's a good idea in a country to have somebody who really does know the system before you start to constitute new assemblages. So, you know, in that case, in India, for example, Bharat, who is just on there, Bharat knows the Operatives inside out. And so therefore has been a great boon to us in that particular geography. But we have made the mistake in others where we have kind of gone in, put an assemblage together and then left them to it. And the only time they've seen those ceremonies was the ones when they went through it. And that's no good. You know, it is important that people actually do experience it for a while before progressing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I suppose the follow on from that would be, how many brethren would it need to take to start an assemblage?
I'm going to ask Nigel to answer that. Nigel, can you come off mute?
Oh, he's not shying away, is he?
I would suggest, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I would suggest a minimum of 16, but preferably 20, of which at the very minimum, 3 of those must be 6 and 3 of those must be 5s. But it would be better if you had 5 6s and 4 or 5 5s. The other brethren must normally be 2, 3 or 4, although if the Grand Master Masons are minded, they can issue a dispensation to allow indentured apprentices to become founders.
The reason that I wanted Nigel to answer, first of all, is because under Nigel's term of office of 10 years as first Grand Master Mason, there have been 39 assemblages constituted. And so therefore, in terms of making the decisions on assemblages, Nigel is an expert. Secondly, I wanted the opportunity for people to hear that and to also note that I think, Nigel, that of all the Grand Masters that are listed in the yearbook, you're the only one who's actually installed his successor.
That's very true. That's very true.
So given that, I wanted you to have a chance to speak.
Yes. Yes, normally it's dead man's shoes.
No, thanks, Nigel. That's brilliant. Brethren, are there any further questions? Oh, here we go. We've got Brother Ted from New York. Hi, Ted.
How you doing, Ameet? Grandmaster Mason, first Grandmaster Mason. I've always been admonished not to communicate with anybody at the Operatives except through the scribe. So I take this as a great honor to be able to talk to you directly. And in our assemblage, it is by invitation only. And I hold the sixth degree, but I just wanted to thank you for clarifying so much in your talk that I'd not experienced in my lessons at the craft, at the assemblage. So thank you so much.
Which is your assemblage? Is it? Are you Washington Monument?
Trinity Church Assemblage.
Trinity Church. Yeah. A relatively new assemblage, I think. Trinity Church is what,
1910, I think it might have been.
2000.
2010, I think.
2010, yeah.
1910. That would precede.
That would precede the order.
That's right.
Paul, it was one of the first I did back at Masonic Week 2010 when we did a number.
Yes, yes.
So Trinity Church was one of those.
Yes.
I don't think Paul was there then. Well, must have been though.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, you must have been. Yeah.
I was there. Yeah, I was
Thank
around.
you, Ted.
Thank you, sir.
Could we go next to Brother Eric Brown? Hi, Eric.
Hi, Amit. Not a question, but Paul touched on the Scottish Society earlier on. I'm not a senior member of that order, but I'm possibly one of the few who is a member of both the Guild of Masons and the Operatives. And I'd just like to, I don't think there's enough differences between the two societies to warrant a separate talk, but I would point out that in the Scottish Guild of Masons, we are orientated where the Deputy Master Mason actually sits in the north rather than the west or the east. And the reason for that being, it means that the Deputy Master Mason can sit, he can view the sun rising in the east, tracking through the day and setting in the west. I've also put a note in the chat as to the website details of the Guild Lodge. Thanks.
There's another difference as well, Eric, which is that the Scottish Guild is Christian, whereas the Worshipful Society is secular, and that gave us a bit of a challenge when we put the Concordat together, because in the Concordat we wanted to say that anyone with an equivalent degree could visit either society, and in the end we came to an agreement with the Guild that they would retain their Christian nature, obviously, but they would allow non-Christians to visit from the Operatives, provided it was explained to them that it was Christian and they would not be offended. And that seems to have worked very, very well.
Thanks, Eric. Could we next go to Brother Gary Davies, please? Hi, Gary.
Hi. Thank you very much for a very informative lecture. If one was to join the order, you seem to have a huge amount of ritual books there.
Mm-hmm.
How much does a new member have to learn to progress?
Well, it's not that dissimilar to the craft or the mark, really. You know, the books, whilst there's a lot of them, you know, so they're not necessarily that thick. You know, there's that sort of size. But we have a couple of extra officers. We have an additional deacon. So we've got a junior warden's deacon, senior warden's deacon, a master mason's deacon. We also, of course, got the J and B, as I mentioned earlier, but they're 6th degree. Superintendent of work is the DC, he has an assistant. So it's not that dissimilar, you know, the sense that the ritual is mainly the deputy master mason or the worshipful master has got the fair share of it. And of course, you go through all of the other offices before you get to that. In the assemblage, there are 4 degrees to work. The 1st degree you would be very familiar with. It is very similar to a craft initiation. It really is. The 2nd degree is very similar to the mark degree. Then it starts to break away from it. It then starts to become quite unique. And it is absolutely different when you get to the 5th and 6th. But again, you wouldn't tend to do any work in there until you got the 6th degree, you know, to allow you to actually do that. So I would say that, you know, think of it in terms of your craft lodge and you wouldn't be far off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Paul, I've got a question that's just come in. Could you mention a little more on the ancient dramas, please?
Sure. Could I mention a bit more? There are 3 dramas. The first drama is very short. It takes a few moments to work, and it really does work around the footing cornerstone. And you saw the picture I showed where the symbol of the swastika is actually placed upon the footing cornerstones. It's really to show that. And then there is a point whereby we actually have one of the master masons walks around using a skirt to actually mark lengths off on the diagonals that have been produced. And that refers back to the point within a circle that you see in craft masonry. The ancient drama then follows that, which is a very long performance. It's probably around about an hour to an hour 15. and that is very much the third degree in the craft, but it is enacted quite specifically. We have 3 ruffians, Jubilat, Jubilo, and Jubilum, and they actually are bothered that the temple is nearly complete, and they do not have the secrets of the Grand Master Masons to allow them to go and form grand assemblages of their own. And so they make a petition to the Grand Master Masons saying, you know, that they wish to do this for their own advantage. And that's when the Grand Master Masons make the statement, there is only 3 Grand Master Masons in the whole of Israel, and they reject their petition. What then happens is that the representative goes back to the group of 12 and points out, sorry, group of 15, and points out that the Grand Master Masons have rejected their offer, and they then decide that they're going to go and kill one of them to get his rod. And then that happens in the same way that you would imagine in the craft. You know, the 3 ruffians take the place of the master and the wardens, and they attack the poor chap, and in his dying moments he breaks his rod up and scatters it to the 4 winds, and at that point says, I was too quick for you, and he dies, and they can't put the rod back together. They then disperse. There's a roll call taken. We find that the 3 are missing. They actually are then apprehended, brought back before King Solomon, who has their obligations and the penalties inflicted upon them. So there's a bit of screaming at that point. And that is actually the point at which we lose that 3rd Grand Master Mason. Derek Burt, who asked the first question, actually has gone through that ceremony. He was the 3rd Grand Master Mason. So you can see we don't really kill them. And at that point, then the new 3rd Grand Master Mason comes in for his year. And what we actually have is that we have a DMM drama, as it's called, a Deputy Master Mason drama, and that is always the person who will go on to the 3rd Grand Master Mason at the end of that ceremony. Then the final drama that we have on the day is the dedication of the temple. And, you know, that's, again, quite short, but it explains certain things that are done in the Constitution ceremony. And it shows the temple itself being dedicated, and then the 1st Grand Master Mason says the work is finished, and then it is the end of the dramas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. It's fantastic. We've got one final question, if you're okay for time. Could we go to Brother Robert Chilvers, please? I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Robert.
That's fine. Thank you, Ameet. Just one point. I was involved when we constituted, that's the word, a number of assemblages in India a long time ago now. It was when Arthur Craddock was the first Grand Master Mason, and we had Jim Field, and God rest his soul, we had David Kibble-Rees. All went to India, showed a great deal of commitment to the work, and it was a tremendous experience. I think there were 2 assemblages that were set up in Mumbai. I believe there was 1 set up in Delhi, and I believe 2 in Chennai. The point I wish to make is that there is a great deal of help available for you if you want to set up a new assemblage. It was superb, and even help in giving the plans for the considerable amounts of equipment that you would need to manufacture different types of stone, various types of little gantries with plumb lines, and all sorts of strange equipment that you would learn something about. And when we set these up, I mean, I was the SIW for India for a few years, but I think Steve Hines and 1 or 2 other people came to London, and Steve was put through the various degrees in King Solomon's quarries, and I was put through, I think, the 6th degree. We had a great deal of enthusiasm from the brethren in India, and it's a credit to see Bharat here having made the degree of commitment and studied the various rituals to see India in the position it is today. So it might sound difficult, but it isn't really.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, India is our second largest region.
Amit and Paul, if you won't mind, I'll just show you a photograph.
Okay.
This is Arthur Craddock, David Kibble Rees, Jim Field, and all. This is at the consecration of the Shore Temple Assemblage Constitution.
And of course, Brian Blanchard, which is the name.
Yeah, Brian Blanchard was there. Yes.
Brian was there.
Yeah, and Bob was also there.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Amazing. Paul, are you okay for one more question?
Sure.
We've got Brother Ted again in New York. Hi, Ted.
Hello again. I just was curious, having contributed fully to the setting zone fund. Is the building? Is there a tour of the building? Is it worthy of being toured?
It's kind of a little bit out of in the sticks in a sense, but one of the things that we will do is that we will do a video tour so that you can actually see it and then make a view on that. That's something that we want to do this year once we reopen.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
No problem. That will be put on the website.
Thank you so much.
Brethren, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. First Grandmaster, a massive thank you to you and your team as well for agreeing to come on and putting this talk on. It's captured the hearts of many, and I know many are going to be looking back on the YouTube video just to catch up and try and soak in as much as they can. Best contact for anyone who would like to join? Have you got a page or a site?
Yeah, if you've seen that the site was on the very first slide, and it's the Grand Clerk, David Joyce. His details are on the bottom of the screen.
Perfect, thank you. Brethren, just going back to our question, I'll be told off if I don't announce the winners, because I think I've forgotten this last couple of weeks. But the question, in the Allied Masonic degrees, how many degrees are there? I'm going to get a slap on my wrist now because I forgot to say in England and Wales. So there were many answers coming through, but it is England and Wales, and the answer was 5. So congratulations to both Brother Al Perry and Martin Smith. A mug will be on its way to you as soon as you let me know your addresses. Brethren, next week we're delighted to announce that we've got most illustrious brother Jonathan C. Roberts, Grand Master of the Masonic Order of the Pilgrim Preceptors, with us, who will be taking us on a talk and a journey through the wonderful degree and the wonderful order that is the Pilgrim of Preceptors. I would like now to bid you all a very good evening. Thank you ever so much, especially to those who have dialed in from overseas. I know the time difference is such where it does make it rather difficult. But once again, brethren, thank you as always. Please stay safe, keep healthy, and look after each other.
Peace to all.
Thank you, Ameet.